Kate, Gerry, thank you for sitting down with me. Today is the 8th birthday that Madeleine would have enjoyed had she been with you. We still have no idea where Madeleine may be or what's happened to her. You've written a book, Kate, about your experiences. It's based on diaries that you wrote from a few weeks after she'd vanished. Why have you done the book?
I suppose my reason for writing it all down is quite different to the reason to publish it as a book. And initially, when I started to keep my diaries, it was really so that Madeleine would have an account. So when we found her, I'd be able to fill in the gaps. And also Sean and Emily as well, for when they were older. And then going back to sort of 2008, I actually filled in the gaps before I'd started keeping my diaries. So a little bit about me and Gerry and our backgrounds. And again, that was all just for the kids. I suppose there's always been the urge to get the truth out there, obviously, when there's been so many stories written, but we've always had things to weigh up. I mean, ultimately, Madeleine's fund was running out, and I knew that we'd need to raise money, really, to continue the search.
So all the money from this book is going to go to the Madeleine Fund?
It is, yeah.
So that you can continue to try and find out what happened to her?
That's right.
Gerry, obviously, that is the crux of this, isn't it, for you?
Absolutely.
You just don't know. I mean, I'm a father of 3 children. I cannot imagine. I can remember my kids disappearing for a minute or 2 minutes, and that awful panic that you feel as a parent when that happens. To be here years later and have no idea where she is or what may have happened, it must be excruciating, isn't it?
It certainly was, and I think one of the reasons we've had so much public sympathy and empathy is I think every parent does know that feeling when your child is out of sight, even for a few seconds, and the panic it generates. And obviously for any family like ourselves whose child has been abducted, it is the most terrifying experience. But you do adapt, and the pain is not as raw. But you know, we do still manage to get some enjoyment in our life, and we've got 2 other beautiful children who are fantastic, and the support we've had from the public has really helped carry us through. But there's just always something inside, and the pain is never too far away from the surface.
I mean, Kate, do you ever have a day where this doesn't consume you?
I don't think it consumes every minute as it did before, but certainly, you know, Madeleine's absence is there constantly. I mean, as Gerry said, although we do have lovely times at Sean and Emily, and although I've now reached that point where I will allow myself to take time out and just relax or enjoy something, you know, her absence is still tangible. And we can have a lovely family day, but as Sean will point out, it's not really a family day, Mummy, because Madeleine's not here, you know.
Have you considered having another baby? Has that even entered your thought process?
No, I mean, I think you probably know, obviously, our 3 children were born with the help of IVF. So it wouldn't exactly be straightforward anyway. But, you know, we can't replace Madeleine. And I know you're not suggesting that, but I don't know. I think all the grief that we've been through and the busyness of everything, and obviously we've got, you know, Sean and Emily that we need to concentrate on.
Do you both 100% believe she's still alive, or do you have to believe that?
I don't think we can say 100%. I mean, you know, we're realistic. We know there is a chance that she may not be alive. But what we do know is there's a very good chance that she is alive, and there's certainly nothing to suggest otherwise. And as you know as well, there's many children who are found years down the line, and they could have been written off, you know, and then they were found. So it would be wrong, you know, it is wrong to give up on children who are still missing.
I mean, what is so strange about this story, and I remember living through it here in England at the time, is there's just no evidence of anything. She just vanished.
Virtually.
Obviously there was a man seen carrying.
But we don't know who he was. We don't even know if that was Madeleine. It could have been anybody. I mean,
we don't, but nobody came forward to eliminate themselves. Right. And obviously the timing of it, you know.
So you believe from all that you know that shadowy figure that was seen with a young child was probably the abduction taking place? Is that what you think?
Yeah, completely. And I think, another aspect about the book, I strongly believe a good reason for publishing it is putting these facts together about the sighting of the man carrying the child and the detail of that, seen by her friend Jane Tanner. Jane hadn't seen him. She literally would have been plucked from thin air. But there's another sighting which Kate describes in the book that occurred about 45 minutes later, where an Irish family gave an almost identical description of the man and the child independently of Jane's. It wasn't in the public domain.
Let's get back to what happened. You were on holiday in Portugal. You were at a child-friendly resort, and at about 7:30 you were putting your kids to bed. You had the two-year-olds and you had Madeleine, who was 4. Tell me what happened. Gerry, maybe you start.
Well, it's interesting. We've always had a routine where the twins usually went to bed about 7, and Madeleine used to have a little bit extra time. This was at home as well, and I'd played tennis that evening, and Kate had got the kids ready. So when I came back, we pretty much took them into their bedroom, read them a story, and tucked them into their cots for the twins and Madeleine into her bed, and we'd arranged to have dinner with her friends, and we're literally dining in the tapas area, which was adjacent to apartment as the crow flies. It's only about 50 metres away, which we'd done the 4 previous nights as well, coming back and forward to check the children.
This remains one of the highly contentious parts of this, because you're both professional medical people and you've got 3 very young children. And I know that you've expressed regret over this, and I'm not after more of that. It would be completely pointless. In terms of the normal practice, though, when you were with them, would you ever have left them alone in that situation if you'd been at home, for example, back in England?
Definitely not. I mean, the closest thing that you would do to that, and it didn't feel that different, would be dining in your garden.
I mean, Kate, as a mother here, you must live through that all the time and beat yourself up about it. I've seen you do that, and I've heard you do that. And my heart goes out to you, because there's not a parent I know that hasn't mislaid a child at some stage.
All I can say is, if I'd have thought there was any risk at all, it just wouldn't have happened. And that's all I can say, really, and it's hard to, sometimes I think at home when I was going to the post office and I had the twins in the double buggy, because it wouldn't fit through the post office door, I used to get my aunt to come and meet me and just stand by the door, even though it's a tiny post office and I can see the buggy. So then I think, how does that equate with sort of how we ate in Portugal? And all I can say is it just felt so safe. It was a family-friendly resort. It's the first time I'd ever been to Portugal, but all the family and friends I knew that had been there said it's a lovely country and it's really safe and it's for families.
Gerry, look, difficult question, but obviously the resort you were in had lots of nanny facilities and they weren't that expensive to use, and you both were professionals earning money. Another criticism that's put to you is, why didn't you just pay to have a nanny if you wanted to go out for dinner?
Yeah, it's not a question of money. We did what we thought was best in the kids' routines, and I think as parents we had a very good routine in terms of the whole bath, bed, story type thing. And I take your point, but for me, if your children are asleep upstairs in a bedroom and you're dining in the garden, you're out of sight and you can't hear them. And that's the similar thing to me.
Except I guess that most people's homes are secure.
Sure.
This was not a secure property. People could come in and off the street if they wanted to. That's where the criticism, I guess, comes at its most fierce towards you, is, you're intelligent people and you were certainly good parents. There's no one's questioning that from all accounts that we've all heard. It's just when you have people coming in and off a street like that and it's not your home and it's not really secure.
Again, I think it's back to the safety issue. We did not perceive an element of threat, and child abduction is so rare. Why would you ever have thought that someone was going to get into an apartment and steal your child? It just didn't enter our head. If it had, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, we've been through all these questions day in, day out. Yeah. Why, how, why? And I can only, say to myself, well, Kate, you felt really safe, and I know how much I love my children, and there's no way I'd have taken a risk.
I think the worst thing, though, about the focus on our behaviour, and, if we could change it, we would have. We can't change it. But it takes the focus away from the abductor. And that becomes quite frustrating for us because Madeleine's still missing, and that person or those responsible for taking her are still at large, Piers. And that's where
somebody somewhere knows what's happened, and that must eat you up much more than fireside critics saying you should have done this, that, and the other.
Yeah, it's not like a double punishment. We have expressed that regret. It doesn't change it. And what we've tried to focus on from day one is what can we do to find Madeleine and those responsible. And if we could go back and jump in the TARDIS, we would be there.
There's no one more than us that I'd want to change what we did that night, obviously,
Do you have a lot of regret now, looking back on it? Obviously, not just because Madeleine went, but do you think with hindsight, you should have done more to protect them? Do you feel that?
Well, obviously, because of what's happened, and I can beat myself up every day, but I can't change it now. I have to go forward and see what I can do now.
You have to be careful as well, because I think, almost certainly, if we had been dining on the balcony of the apartment, this would not have happened. I'm absolutely clear about that. But child abductions do happen when parents are with their children. People are stolen at resorts and in parks. And there was a case in the UK a few years ago where a little child, a 6-year-old girl, I think, was stolen out of the bath while her parents were in the living room. So, we made a mistake, but the crime is the person taking the child. And it is incredibly rare, but that's the focus, and that person could strike again, and we need to find them.
I want to take a short break. When I come back, I want to talk to you about the moment you discovered that Madeleine had gone. What was the exact moment, let me ask you, Kate, when you realised Madeleine had gone?
Well, I went back to do a check at 10 o'clock, and I went through the patio doors at the back, and I listened for a minute in the living room, and it was all quiet. And I just noticed that the door to the children's bedroom was quite far open, and we always leave it just so it's slightly ajar, just to let a little bit of light in. And I thought to myself, did Matt leave the door open at 9:30? Because Matt checked on them at 9:30. And I thought that must be what happened. So I went to close over the children's door, and just as I was about to close it, it kind of slammed, as if like a gust of wind had shut it. So then I thought, did I leave the patio doors open? So I just checked, and they were closed. And then I went back just to open the door again a little bit. And just as I was doing that, I just glanced at Madeleine's bed, which was by the wall, and it was really dark, and I couldn't quite make her out. But I just kept looking for what felt like minutes, thinking, where is she, And it seems daft now, because normally you think I'd put the light on, but it's that inbuilt thing of don't wake the kids up. And then I looked and realised she wasn't there, and then I thought, so if she'd gone through to our bedroom, that'd explain why the door was open as well. So I just quickly looked in our room, and she wasn't there, and that was probably the first time that panic started to build. So then obviously I ran back into her room, and just as I did that, there was the curtains, which were closed, just kind of blew open. And as they did that, I noticed that the shutter was up and the window was open.
And what did you think in that moment?
I thought someone's taken her.
You went down to tell Gerry straight away?
Yeah, I basically quickly whizzed around the apartment, about 15 seconds. I don't know why. In my head, I was just thinking if someone's been in and she's cowering somewhere, I guess is why I did it. And then I just flew out through the back, down the stairs to the restaurant. And as soon as their table was in sight, I just started screaming, Madeleine's gone. And then they all jumped up and were running over saying, she must be there, she must be there. But obviously I knew.
And Gerry, this is every father's nightmare. Every mother's nightmare, but it's, as a father, a young girl, and she's gone, what are you thinking?
Well, the first thing that went through to my head, and it was just disbelief. I was saying, she can't be there, and then I was running to the apartment with Kate, and so I've checked, and she's going, I've checked, she's not there. And I went into the bedroom, and I found it just as Kate described, and when I saw that window pushed wide open and the shutter up, which we'd left down the whole week, it was horrible. And I lowered the shutter, and I went through the front door, and I was able to lift the shutter from the outside, which...
Do you know that yet? Do you know, is there any evidence how this person came in and out?
Well, I mean, there are a number of options, and...
No actual evidence. There's nothing they could find to say this is unequivocally how this person came in.
I mean, it's possible they came through the window. They could have come through the patio doors, although that was in sight of where we were dining. So I think that's probably less likely. For all we know, they could have had a key. You know, lots of people have stayed in that apartment over years to the front door. So
there was a report that morning Madeleine had asked you why you didn't come when she'd been crying. Did that set alarm bells off when she did that?
Well, it's one of those things, isn't it, with hindsight? But at the time when she said it did. You know, we were saying, what do you mean, Madeleine? You know, kind of, and we were trying to think, you know, was someone upset at bedtime, you know, or at bath time, and we kind of pressed her a bit and said, when was this? And she just dropped it and carried on playing. And at that point, I'm thinking, oh God, I hope she didn't wake up, you know, in between our checks, you know, because I'd hate to think, you know, that could have happened and then she'd worry that we weren't there. But at the same time, that didn't, to me, just seemed a little bit odd, because I thought, yes, it could happen, but it just seemed a bit of a coincidence that we'd check, leave, she'd wake up, get herself back off to sleep, which kids don't often do. So she'd be asleep again before the next.
Do you have any blame that you would attach to the resort itself now, given the time that's gone past?
No, I mean, I think, you know, the person to blame is the person that's taken Madeleine. There's no doubt about that. And it's like everything, like the decision we made. You can argue, well, maybe we should have known about burglaries. Maybe that would have changed our behaviour. You know,
there have been a number of burglaries there?
Yeah, there's been quite a lot of burglaries. But
do you know how many there had been now? Do you know all the figures for that?
No, we're not sure. I mean, it's difficult because we didn't have access to other crimes and things like that, but we know of other people contacting us saying the apartments have been burgled.
So one of the real frustrations for you is there have been these two investigating authorities, one in Britain, one in Portugal. Gerry, do you think there is a missing link here? Do you believe that if enough time and money and resource is devoted to this, that there's some stone that's been left unturned in this investigation?
I'm absolutely certain that there are things that could be done based on the information that's available to us. There are multiple areas and lines of inquiry which we think could be explored further based on what is in the Portuguese file. And I think it's critical, really, that for any major serious unsolved crime, certainly in the UK, a review would be a routine procedure, and that's when someone else comes in and looks at what's been done. And that hasn't been done within Portugal. When
the police turned up, what was their initial behaviour like towards you? We know that things turned pretty unpleasant quite quickly, but when they first arrived, Kate, were they sympathetic? Were they helpful? What was the mood like?
Well, the first police that turned up were what were called GNR police. They weren't the criminal police as such, but of course we didn't know the different kind of categories then. And I suppose you've got to bear in mind that we had the language barrier, so it's incredibly difficult. I guess my biggest concern, and it's hard to know if this is because of interpretation, is I didn't feel that they sense the urgency as much as I'd like them to. Obviously, I knew my child had been taken, but it's quite hard to get somebody else to believe that.
Did you think, Gerry, from the start that they were suspicious of you?
Certainly, in the next day, I had no doubt that we, as the parents, and being there and the last people to see Madeleine, that we'd be investigated. I think anyone who's got an inkling of any sort of police-type investigation knows that's going to happen. So, we went in and gave statements and were happy to help. And things like, what the information we gave about Madeleine and what she said that morning, we gave all this information and exactly what we'd done in the hope that it would help.
Well, has there ever been any discrepancy between anything that either of you has said, any of your friends that were with you that night? Has there been anything that if an outside lawyer looked at this, they would say, that doesn't add up?
You have to remember there were 9 people in a party here who didn't expect anything of this kind to happen. You know, so if you're talking about inconsistencies of time and being out by 5 or 10 minutes, then I think that's to be expected. I think that'd be normal. I think if it was all, you know, tightly to the minute, that'd be more suspicious, but there's no major.
I think one of the best examples of an inconsistency is when I came out the apartment, having checked Madeleine about 9:05, I was going back to the tapas area, and I saw one of the guys who I'd played tennis with, and he was walking up the opposite side of the road with his child, and Jane walked up and saw us, but I'm adamant that it was on the other side of the road, and Jane's adamant, and in fact the other guy were adamant it was on that side of the road. So 2 people are saying one thing, I'm saying the other. The key thing is it happened, and I can't say, well, maybe I did cross the road. You know, my memory says it was the other side of the road, and the British police are pretty clear about this, that you get these sorts of inconsistencies all the time because no one's writing down as you're sitting having your dinner.
And also, as Kate said, if it was all completely in agreement about every tiny detail, that to me would seem more suspicious.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we come back, I want to talk to you about the moment that you realised for the first time that the Portuguese police were not looking for anybody else in connection with Madeleine's disappearance. They were looking at you. When the mood began to change, massive media attention, a lot of criticism against the Portuguese police and authorities for not moving quickly enough, not doing their job properly, and they retaliate, it seems to me, or they respond, let's be polite here, in the worst possible way, as far as you're concerned. They make you formal suspects, arguido. What was the moment like for you when you heard that was happening? Because that completely changed things.
I mean, I think this had gone on probably sort of end of July into August, really. There was certainly a change in the media coverage, and it was obvious that things were being leaked, stories were being leaked to the media to smear us, essentially, or to show us in a negative light. And that's, I think, when we started to sense the hostility. And that coincided with a time where suddenly our communication, our meetings with the police stopped. So not only were we having to face all that negativity and lies, we were also left in this void of information. And we found out that we were going to be made arguido.
It must be the worst moment of all, other than the moment you know that Madeleine's gone, to have somebody look you in the eye and effectively say to both of you, we think you killed your daughter. That's a terrible moment, isn't it?
Well, I just thought, what is going on here? I thought, you're right, nothing as worse as the first night, but I just felt like we were about to get destroyed at that point.
Yeah, I think the realisation, and this particularly apparent for Kate, that effectively there was no ongoing search because there was clearly a strategy where the public were being led to believe that there was evidence that Madeleine was dead, and that simply wasn't the case.
I mean, Gerry, you kept remarkably calm. that almost played to your disadvantage. People thought, why is he being so calm? Had you been hysterical, they'd say, why is he being so hysterical? You can't win in that position.
You didn't see me behind the scenes.
But you were remarkably calm. I mean, if I'd been in your shoes and I'd been accused of something like that, I think I would have freaked out. How did you manage to keep your composure?
I think the key thing is, as I say, behind the scenes, what you see...
Privately, it's very different. I mean, I saw my husband on the floor crying his eyes out, you know, so I think...
at that point, at the lowest point, I thought our family was going to be destroyed, or the potential for it to be destroyed was there. But ultimately, and particularly when you're tired and you're doing that, you come back, and the overwhelming objective that we have is to find Madeleine and what you need to do to get through that and to keep that search going. But, we should be clear, there was no formal accusation.
No.
We were never arrested, there were no charges, and the arguido thing literally is translated as suspect, but it would be, you could argue if we'd been made arguido on day one because they had to ask us some questions which might incriminate you, that would have been fine. And in the August I said, look, if we have to start from square one again, bring it on, and we will be there and do it. But there was clearly a portrayal in the media that there was evidence incriminating us, and we were clearly suggested that if we confessed to hiding Madeleine's body, then that would be the end of it.
Were you offered a specific deal like that? Were you offered if you accept that you did this, you can go to prison for 2 years and be out?
Yeah.
That was what I read. Is that true?
It is true. I mean, it's hard because nobody likes it to be called a deal, but indirectly it was put to us that if we confessed to hiding Madeleine's body, so not killing her but accidental death, and if we confessed to hiding her body, then it would be a non-custodial service, 2 years. Gerry could go back to work, we were told. But I was just crazy, you know. The hardest thing, as you say, about the Arguido was the realisation suddenly that no one was looking for Madeleine. Because if they were looking at us and focusing all their attention and resources on us, or trying to find stuff against us, then who was looking for Madeleine? So I was angry. I mean, I'd gone from kind of this downward spiral in July when nobody was really speaking to us, in August with all the headlines, and suddenly I just felt strong because I thought, you know, I'm damned if this will happen to my daughter. You know, if they're not going to be there for her, then we have to fight for her.
I'm going to take another short break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about the fight that you then launched to try and find Madeleine, and what you think are the possible unanswered questions that need to be answered.
We welcome the news today, although it is no cause for celebration. It's hard to describe how utterly despairing it was to be named Arguido and subsequently portrayed in the media as suspects in our own daughter's abduction.
That was just after you'd been informed you were no longer Arguido, no longer suspects, as they call it there. And whilst there's relief in your voice, Kate, there's also, I can tell, real simmering anger. What did it do to your public opinion, particularly back home here, where it was such an enormous story? You were front page news for weeks after weeks, after months, a lot of it negative, a lot of it pushing really hard, as almost as if some of the media wanted you to be guilty. I remember reading the headlines thinking, wow, they're pushing the envelope here. You're having to live in this country, and you're having to live with being called Arguido, suspects. That must have been a pretty awful experience, wasn't it?
You know, it was a great story for the media, but you're right. I mean, this was our life. We were having to live it, you know. I
think it's a bad episode for the media, you know, because obviously we took action against the Express, and it was a last resort, but they were rehashing headlines from months before over and over again, and we were prepared to cut a bit of slack around the Arguido time. We were declared Arguido. These things were happening in Portugal. But, you know, months later, and some of the stories were just complete fabrications. It was detrimental to the search.
I think the other important issue was the stories that were being put out there were implying that Madeleine was dead.
Yeah.
Of all the madcap theories, then you must see more than anybody else. You must hear and see everything that comes out about this. Are there any that you think have any kind of credibility that you think should be really pushed further?
It's incredibly difficult, Piers, because if you speak to Ernie Allen at the National Centre for Missing Exploited Children, who've got the most expertise in these types of stranger or stereotypical kidnappings, what Ernie says, and it's stuck with us, is until you know who's taken your daughter, you don't know. And you can think of a whole host of scenarios, and I think that he's given us some examples. When Elizabeth Smart was abducted at knife point from her bedroom, which she shared with her sister, he said, there's no way we could have known that she would be living just miles from home. J.C. Dugard, I mean, all of these cases, who could have imagined it? So we've got to be completely open-minded as to who's taken her and why, and I don't think we'll know until we find that person.
One of the things I was struck by in the book is your quite open account of what it's done to your marriage, this. I mean, do you feel that you've been quite fortunate to stay together? Do you think this could have split up many couples?
I think that's without doubt, really. I mean, it's such a major event to happen to your life, and the consequences and ramifications are massive. And we're very fortunate, you know, we had a strong relationship before. We've got a great family and really good friends who've supported us, but not everyone has that. And as you know, the statistics will show that most marriages break down in circumstances
I
like
mean,
that.
at its worst, what's it been like trying to have a relationship through this?
It's been incredibly difficult, and I think, as you can see from the footage and other things, I found my feet much quicker than Kate and was able to put away a lot of the images of Madeleine and sort of compartmentalise them and almost take a conscious aspect that thinking about the worst wasn't helping me, and it wasn't helping the search. And there's been times where you're just managing to keep your own head above the water, and when you're trying to get support, and this is a two-way thing, and I feel terrible now looking back, but there were times when I couldn't support Kate because I thought, I'm going to go under.
Did either of you ever get suicidal?
No, I mean, I don't think I was ever suicidal, but I often wished my life would be over. I'd never have planned anything or done anything. I knew that wasn't a possibility, that wasn't an option. But so much pain that I used to think about, God, let's just pull the duvet over and I won't wake up tomorrow. I
mean, Gerry hinted there that there have been times when he feels bad now about being unable to support you. That must have been a particularly difficult period for you when even Gerry couldn't seem to provide any comfort for you.
It was. I mean, there were times when I just wanted to be held or something. But I know that there were times when I couldn't support, like my mum and dad, for example, because we've all suffered in this. And I guess you have to make sure that you're afloat in order to be able to support somebody else. And that works both ways. And we are very fortunate that we've had, really close family that can support us at those times.
We're going to have another short break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about the diary that you've kept and how cathartic that may have been for you, how helpful.
We're doing everything we can, Madeleine, to find you, and there's so many good and very kind people helping us. Be brave, sweetheart. Our only Christmas wish is for you to be back with us again, and we're hoping and praying that will happen. Love you, Madeleine.
How hard is it for you to see video footage of Madeleine, even now?
I think it's the one medium that really brings her back to me in particular. Seeing her moving and her voice, and it's our Madeleine as opposed to the iconic picture of Madeleine, the missing child. It's our daughter, and sometimes we just go and put the video on and sit and watch it with the kids as well.
You're both religious people, and you had a private meeting with the Pope. What was that like for you, Kate?
Well, at that point, it was just incredibly important. I mean, I truly believed that would make a difference for Madeleine. And I've often described it as the next step, really, the closest you can get to kind of meeting God in some way. And I just thought all my prayers, etc., would be channeled more quickly to God.
What did he say to you?
He just very simply took a photograph of Madeleine and placed his palm on it and blessed her. And he just said, I'll continue to pray for Madeleine's safe return and for all your family.
Has what's happened to you damaged your faith?
It's challenged my faith. I mean, there's no doubt about that, really. I'm still there, I've still got my faith, but there have been times, and particularly back in, I'd say 2008 was my worst year, where, I'm not embarrassed to say I felt angry with God. I couldn't understand why all this had happened, not Madeleine being taken, because I don't believe that was the will of God, but everything that had happened subsequently. And the fact that we just felt so many challenges, and particularly in Portugal, where I felt we really needed help. I really wanted someone to stand up and say, this is all wrong, we'll help you. And I guess I threw that back at God, really, and said, why are you allowing all of this to happen? We can handle so much, but this just seems too much.
And Gerry, do you still keep Madeleine's room as it always was?
Yeah, there's a lot more stuff in it now, lots of presents and things, but we have pretty much kept it. I'm less sentimental about it, I have to say, I think, but Kate finds it particularly comforting going in there.
It's busy, and Sean and Anne, we like going in. They always go in and say, can we borrow one of Madeleine's teddy bears and all.
How have they dealt with it?
Brilliantly. And we've always been as honest as we could be with them, and that was certainly the advice we were given.
What do they think happened to Madeleine?
Well, they know that a man has taken her, and they know that that's wrong. They know that we're all looking for her. Lots of people are helping us.
Looking at Sean and Emily, though, you wouldn't know that a major trauma has happened in their lives, and they can talk about, even on holiday last week, and they meet little kids and they talk about brothers and sisters, and they say, oh, well, we've got a big sister, Madeleine, but she's missing and we're looking for her, and they talk about the wristbands.
Today would have been her 8th birthday. I mean, every part of you just must be wondering what she looks like now, apart from anything else, how you would have celebrated the day. I mean, do you commemorate the day? Will you do anything with the other 2 children? How do you deal with a birthday when she's not there?
Well, what we've done the last few years, we have marked the day. You know, we've had like just a small sort of birthday tea, really, with close family and friends. This year's obviously different with the launch of the book and stuff, so we're very busy. I mean, it's hard. I find it hard to think, well, I've got an 8-year-old daughter, you know, and as you say, what does she look like? And I do try and imagine her and make her taller and stuff, but it's hard, you know, because we should be with her, you know, celebrating a birthday together. So,
in many ways, I think launching the book today is a good thing to do on her birthday. It's doing something positive. It's re-energising the search. We've launched a campaign, as you said, with News International to get a review, and I think these are milestones that you pass, and you know there's going to be media attention irrespective, so it's always a good time from our point of view to capitalise on that. We've just got to find her, really.
After the break, we'll talk specifically about how people watching this can possibly help you, and to see also where you think the focus of investigation should now be. How can people help? If you're watching this interview and you're keen to try and help you in some way in the search for Madeleine, what is the most effective way that people can do this?
I think it's 2 things. One, read the book, Madeleine. Our website's got all the key information as well, and contact numbers and key images, so that's www.findmadeleine.com. And we've had lots of information through that. People in the UK and Portugal, we want them to lobby their MPs and governments to conduct the review. And that's the call to action today, really, to try and get that done.
Madeleine had a very distinctive eye pattern, didn't she? Tell me about that, Kate, in case people see somebody they think may be Madeleine. Tell me about her eye.
If I'm honest, we haven't put too much emphasis on her eye, because I think you have to be very close to her to see it. But her eyes are slightly different colours, and one of them has this brown fleck in it, which you do notice particularly on photographs. But
slightly distinctive eye colours and a little fleck. And do you know if that would still be there if she's now 8 years old?
I certainly believe it wouldn't have changed. I think there's been a bit of debate as to whether it's the technical terms of coloboma, or whether it's a defect in the iris. I don't think it is, actually. I think it is actually just an additional bit of colouring. She certainly had no visual problems. And
if people see somebody they think could possibly be Madeleine, who should they call?
They should call the police, local police. You know, if they really think it is Madeleine and it gets addressed there and then, it's actually quite difficult if you get information coming in historically about sightings. So the advice is clear, it should be to call the local police.
But if they could cover all options and let our investigation team know as well, that would be really helpful.
Have there been moments when you've been pretty much confident that you may have found her?
Never.
I don't think so, and I don't think we've ever allowed ourselves to go there. I mean, early on, when there was the odd kind of what turned out to be a hoax call, you always have that real hope of this could be it, because it could all just be over. But since then, because of the total emotional roller coaster really that we've been on, you try and hold back, really. And a lot of the pictures we've been sent that have been looked at, you kind of know it's not, but you just need total verification.
Do you still talk to Madeleine? Do you still have any kind of conversation with her?
I do. I mean, I still go into her bedroom twice a day, just to open the curtains and stuff and close them at night, and I'll just have a little word to her, and I still keep my diary, so...
Can you sleep okay now?
I can, actually, yeah. It took a long time, because the nights were the worst. I mean, I'll still have the odd night where if she's very much on my mind and something's upset me, then it's hard to sleep, but I'm sleeping fine now.
I mean, there have been, as you said earlier, there have been cases quite recently of girls who just disappeared, reappearing. You know, in J.C. Dugard's case, 18 years later from captivity. When you see those stories, does your heart flip a bit? Do you think there's hope? Or is it almost like a knife in your back that Madeleine hasn't?
I think overall it gives you hope. I mean, you know, obviously every day we hope that it's not going to be 18 years, as every parent would. But at the end of the day, it just highlights how easy it is for children to disappear off the radar and to turn up, you know, many, many years later. So by that point, many people would have written that child off for dead, and it just shows you how wrong you can be.
I think the strongest thing for us is the public consciousness that these sorts of abductions, children are found, and that is more important, and it's really important not to give up on Madeleine. You can't give up on them. We've got to keep her image out there, and who knows how she'll be found, whether it'll be recognised. Obviously we want to try and track the abductor.
I mean, there's a tiny chance, I guess, that Madeleine might be somewhere where she may see this interview. You never know. You don't know who she's with or where she is. If she was, what would you say to her?
I'd certainly say, Madeleine, we're still looking for you, and if you get a chance, tell the police who you are.
Kate, what would you say if you had the chance?
I'd just say, you know, we love you, Madeleine. We're not giving up. We're still looking for you. If you can, let somebody know, honey, and we'll get you home.
Well, I just hope you keep the faith and that she turns up. I think everybody does. It's been a harrowing time for you. Can't even begin to imagine what you've been through, but I really appreciate you spending the time with me.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.